The quiet hum of fluorescent lights bathed the Ridgewood Gas Go in a pale glow, the kind that made the world feel both timeless and suspended. Thomas Bennett, under the guise of Mike Carter, wiped down the counter with a practiced hand, his movements deliberate, unremarkable. To the occasional customer grabbing a late-night soda or filling up at the pumps, he was just another middle-aged employee, his flannel shirt and faded cap blending seamlessly into the small-town backdrop. But Thomas harbored a secret. He wasn't just a worker. He owned his station, every bolt, every pump, every flickering bulb. For 3 weeks, he'd been working undercover, slipping into the rhythm of night shifts to get an unfiltered view of the station's pulse. Something was off, and tonight, his instincts were screaming. Ridgewood, a sleepy town nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, had seen better days. The textile mill had closed a decade ago, leaving boarded-up storefronts and a lingering sense of loss. Thomas's gas station, a fixture since his father built it in the 70s, was one of the few businesses still thriving, a hub for truckers, locals, and the occasional drifter. But lately, the station had become a magnet for trouble. Reports of fuel thefts and vandalism were spreading across nearby towns, and Thomas had noticed subtle signs that his place was next. A loose lock on the storage shed, crude graffiti scrawled. On the back wall, a faint scratch on pump number 4 that hadn't been there a week ago. He'd learned long ago to trust his gut, honed by years of running a business in a town where everyone knew your name, but not always your secrets. Evening, Mike called Clara Evans, the part-time cashier, as she restocked the cigarette display. Her voice carried the tired warmth of someone who'd worked too many late shifts. "Quiet tonight, huh?" "Too quiet," Thomas replied, his eyes flicking to the security monitor behind the counter. The grainy feed showed the lot, empty save for a lone sedan idling at pump 2. Clara didn't know he was the owner, and he intended to keep it that way. The fewer people who knew, the better he could observe without bias. The door chimed, and 2 teenagers shuffled in, their sneakers scuffing the linoleum. Thomas glanced up, his hands stilling on the counter. They were young, maybe 16 or 17, one tall and lanky, the other shorter with a stocky build. The tall one, Ethan Parker, scanned the shelves, his eyes darting to the door every few seconds. The stockier boy, Lucas Hayes, nudged him, his expression impatient. They stopped near the soda fridge, huddling close, their voices dropping to a tense murmur. Thomas picked up a stack of receipts and moved to the cash register, keeping his movements casual. From there, he caught snippets of their conversation. "I'm telling you, we're not ready," Ethan hissed, his voice low but urgent. "This is a bad idea, Lucas." "We don't have a choice," Lucas shot back, his tone sharper. "You want to deal with what happens if we don't?" Thomas frowned, his fingers tightening around the receipts. The boy's words weren't the typical banter of kids sneaking snacks or planning a prank. There was a weight to them, a fear that set his nerves on edge. Lucas opened the fridge and grabbed a soda, holding it absently as he leaned closer to Ethan. "We've got everything we need. It's not complicated." "It's dangerous," Ethan countered, his voice trembling. "What if it goes wrong?" "It won't," Lucas said, his tone softening but still taut. "Just stick to the plan." Thomas's instincts buzzed like a live wire. Something about the boy's demeanor, the nervous glances, the hushed urgency felt wrong. He decided to make his presence known. With deliberate slowness, he stepped out from behind the counter and began restocking a display of chips nearby. "Evening," he said, his voice calm but firm, glancing their way. The boys froze, their conversation halting like a record scratch. Ethan's face went pale, his soda bottle clutched like a lifeline. Lucas recovered faster, flashing a tight smile. "Hey," he said, his voice a touch too bright. "Just grabbing a drink." Thomas nodded, his expression neutral. "Let me know if you need anything." The tension between the boys was palpable, a current crackling in the air. They exchanged a quick glance before Lucas grabbed a second soda and headed for the register, Ethan trailing behind like a reluctant shadow. As Thomas rang up their purchase, he kept the conversation light. "Quiet night, huh?" "Yeah," Lucas replied. "Too quickly." "Real quiet." Ethan said nothing, his eyes fixed on the floor. When Lucas nudged him, he startled, fumbling with his wallet. Thomas raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "Have a good night," he said, handing Lucas the change. The boys mumbled their thanks and hurried out, their steps almost too fast. Thomas watched them disappear into the night, the chime of the door lingering like an afterthought. His gut twisted. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't harmless. The fear in Ethan's eyes, the defiance in Lucas's stance, they weren't. Troublemakers by nature. Something or someone was pushing them. Thomas stepped outside, the crisp evening air biting at his skin. The lot was empty now, the sedan at Pump 2 long gone. In the distance, he spotted the boys under a street lamp, their heads bent close, their pace quickening. He hesitated, glancing back at Clara, who was busy with the register. His years of running. The station had taught him one thing: trouble didn't resolve itself. If he wanted answers, he had to act. Grabbing his jacket from the back room, Thomas checked the security monitor one last time. The feed showed Pump 4, its faint scratch glinting under the fluorescent lights. He'd installed new cameras last month, hoping to catch any suspicious activity. Now, he wondered if they'd captured more than he realized. As he stepped into the shadows, following the boys at a safe distance, a piece of paper fluttered to the ground where Ethan had stood. Thomas picked it up, his eyes narrowing at the crude sketch, a diagram of Pump 4, marked with arrows and notes he couldn't decipher. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just about vandalism or theft. The boys were caught in something bigger, something dangerous. Thomas tucked the paper into his pocket, his resolve hardening. Ridgewood was his home, the station his father's legacy. Whatever was threatening it, he'd face it head on. But as he trailed the boys down a quiet side street, a single thought gnawed at him. What if he was already too late? In the darkness, a black SUV idled at the edge of town, its driver watching the station through narrowed eyes. Vincent Cole lit a cigarette, the ember glowing briefly before he exhaled a plume of smoke. The boys were late, and he didn't like waiting. If they failed him tonight, they'd learn what happened to those who crossed him. And if anyone else got in his way, well, Ridgewood was about to find out just how far his reach extended. The streets of Ridgewood were cloaked in a stillness that felt both comforting and deceptive, the kind of quiet that hid secrets in its shadows. Thomas Bennett, still playing the role of Mike Carter, moved silently down a side street, his worn jacket blending into the night. The faint glow of a street lamp illuminated the retreating figures of Ethan Parker and Lucas Hayes, their hurried steps and hunched shoulders betraying a fear that gnawed at Thomas's instincts. The crumpled diagram he'd found scrawled with arrows pointing to Pump 4 burned a hole in his pocket. Whatever the boys were tangled in, it wasn't a prank or petty theft. It was something darker, and Thomas was determined to uncover it before it consumed them or his station. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of diesel and damp leaves. Ridgewood's economic decline had left its mark boarded-up shops, cracked sidewalks, and a pervasive sense of being left behind. The Gas Go was a lifeline for the town, a place where truckers swapped stories and locals grabbed coffee before dawn shifts. Thomas had taken over the station after his father's death, vowing to keep it a cornerstone of the community. But now, with rumors of fuel thefts and vandalism creeping closer, he felt the weight of that promise more than ever. The boys' whispered argument at the counter had been a warning. And the diagram was a thread he couldn't ignore. Thomas kept a safe distance, his footsteps muffled by years of practice. He trailed wayward teens before, kids sneaking out to drink or tag walls, but this was different. Ethan's pale face and trembling hands, Lucas's forced bravado. They weren't delinquents. They were scared, caught in something bigger than themselves. The boys turned down a narrow path leading to Willow Park, a small patch of grass and benches on the town's outskirts. A single lamppost cast a feeble circle of light, barely piercing the darkness. Thomas ducked behind a row of overgrown shrubs, his breath steady but his pulse quickening. Ethan and Lucas stopped at a weather bench, their voices low but urgent. Thomas crouched low, straining to hear. "We don't have much time," Lucas sighed, his tone sharp. "Vincent's not patient. We mess this up, and he'll—" "I know," Ethan cut in, his voice shaking. "But this is crazy, Lucas. Tampering with a pump? What if it blows up or something?" "It won't," Lucas snapped, though his confidence sounded forced. "He gave us the plan. We just follow it." Thomas's jaw tightened. Vincent. The name landed like a stone, stirring whispers he'd heard in town: fuel thefts, vandalism, a shadowy figure pulling strings. He edged closer, careful not to rustle the shrubs. Lucas pulled a folded paper from his jacket, spreading it out under the lamplight. It was another diagram, similar to the one Thomas had found, with detailed notes on disabling pump force safety mechanisms. Ethan pointed to a mark, muttering something about siphoning lines, but his hands trembled, betraying his fear. Before Thomas could catch more, the low growl of an engine shattered the silence. A rusted pickup truck rolled into the park, its headlights sweeping across the trees. Thomas ducked lower, his heart pounding. The driver's door creaked open, and a man stepped out lean, with a scar slicing from his temple to his cheek. Vincent Cole. A cigarette dangled from his lips, the ember flaring as he exhaled. His presence was like a storm cloud, heavy with menace. "Vincent," Lucas said, standing quickly, his voice tight. "You got it done?" Vincent's voice was gravelly, each word a blade. "I don't want excuses." Ethan nodded rapidly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Lucas tried to hold his ground, but his bravado faltered under Vincent's piercing gaze. "We're working on it," Lucas said. It's not as easy as Vincent tossed a folded paper at Lucas, who fumbled to catch it. "That's your next job," he said. "Simple enough, even for you two. Tamper with the pump, set it up like I showed you. You screw this up, and it's not just you I'll come for. Your families, your little lives gone." He took a drag from his cigarette, the smoke curling like a threat. "Clear." Lucas clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "We'll do it." Vincent sneered, flicking his cigarette to the ground. "You better. And don't think about running. I've got eyes everywhere." He turned back to his truck, pausing to glance over his shoulder. "Midnight tomorrow. Don't be late." The truck roared off, leaving the boys frozen in the lamplight. Ethan looked like he might collapse, his breath hitching. Lucas clutched a new diagram, his face pale but resolute. Without a word, they turned and trudged back toward town, their steps heavy with dread. Thomas waited until they were out of sight before stepping from the shadows, his mind racing. Vincent Cole wasn't just a local thug. He was organized, ruthless, using kids to do his dirty work. Tampering with a pump wasn't just theft. It was dangerous, a spark away from disaster. Thomas had seen what happened when fuel systems failed. A fire at a station upstate had leveled half a block. He couldn't let that happen here, not to his town, not to his father's legacy. Back at the Gas Go, the fluorescent lights buzzed. As Thomas slipped into the back office, Clara was on break, leaving the station quiet. He pulled the diagram from his pocket, studying its crude lines under the desk lamp. Arrows marked the pump's fuel line, with notes on bypassing the pressure valve. It was precise. Too precise for a couple of scared teens to have drawn up themselves. Vincent had help, maybe a network. Thomas's gaze drifted to the security monitors, the feed showing Pump 4 in stark black and white. He rewound the footage from the past week, his eyes narrowing as a black SUV appeared multiple times, always late at night, always lingering near the pump. A soft knock interrupted him. Clara poked her head in, her brow furrowed. "Everything okay, Mike? You've been jumpy all night." Thomas forced a smile, tucking the diagram away. "Just checking the tapes. Quiet night, right?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flicking to the monitors. "Yeah, but some guy was asking about you earlier. Didn't leave a name, just said he'd be back." She shrugged, but her unease was palpable. Looked like bad news. Thomas's stomach twisted. Vincent or one of his men testing the waters. "Thanks, Clara. I'll keep an eye out." As she left, Thomas turned back to the footage, his resolve hardening. He needed to check Pump 4 himself, see if Vincent had already tampered with it. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped into the lot, the night air biting at his skin. The pump stood, silent, its scratched surface glinting under the lights. He crouched down, running his fingers along the base. The screws were loose, just as the diagram suggested. With a multi-tool, he pried open a side panel, his breath catching as he spotted a small device nestled among the wires, a GPS tracker, its red light blinking steadily. Thomas froze, the implications hitting him like a freight train. Vincent wasn't just stealing fuel. He was monitoring the pump remotely, likely coordinating something bigger. Drugs, weapons, or worse. Thomas had heard of stations being used as fronts for smuggling. He replaced the panel, his mind racing. He couldn't call the police yet. Without concrete evidence, Vincent would slip away, and Ethan and Lucas would pay the price. But doing nothing wasn't an option. Back in the office, Thomas dialed Robert Sullivan, his old friend and a retired cop with connections in the state. "Police." "Rob, it's Thomas," he said, keeping his voice low. "I need your help. Something's going down at the station, and it's bigger than I thought." As the line crackled, Thomas glanced at the monitor. The black SUV was back, idling at the lot's edge. A figure stepped out, too far to identify, but the cigarette ember glowed like a warning. Thomas gripped the phone tighter. Whatever Vincent was planning, it was coming to a head, and he was running out of time to stop it. The Ridgewood Gas Go stood silent under the weight of a starless night, its fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the empty lot. Thomas Bennett, still cloaked as Mike Carter, sat in the back office, the security monitors flickering. With the grainy feed of Pump 4, the GPS tracker he'd found hidden in the pump's wiring, haunted him a blinking red light that confirmed his worst fears. Vincent Cole wasn't just stealing fuel. He was using the station as a cog in a larger machine, one that could grind Ridgewood to dust if Thomas didn't act. The crumpled diagram from Ethan and Lucas, now spread across his desk, was a map to trouble, and the boys were its unwilling guides. Thomas's call to Robert Sullivan had been brief but urgent. "Meet me at the station at dawn," he'd said, his voice low to avoid Clara's ears. Robert, a retired cop with a nose for trouble, had promised to dig into Vincent's name through his state police contacts. But dawn was hours away, and Thomas couldn't shake the image of Ethan's trembling hands or Lucas's forced bravado. The boys were scared, trapped by a man who thrived on fear. Thomas had seen kids like them before, teens on the edge, pushed by circumstance or bad choices, but this was different. Vincent's threats weren't empty, and Ethan and Lucas were running out of time. The clock ticked past 1 a.m. The hum of the station, a constant reminder of its vulnerability. Thomas rewound the security footage again, his eyes scanning for the black SUV that had become Vincent's shadow. The vehicle appeared 3 times in the past week, always after midnight, always near Pump 4. But another detail caught his attention. A delivery truck parked at the convenience store across the street during each visit. The connection was subtle, but Thomas's years at the station had taught him to notice patterns. Vincent wasn't working alone. He was coordinating with someone, using the station as a waypoint. A soft creak from the front broke his focus. Clara was at the register, but the sound came from the lot. Thomas switched to the live feed, his pulse quickening as 2 figures emerged from the shadows, Ethan and Lucas, their hoods up, moving toward Pump 4. Lucas carried a small bag, his steps purposeful but tense. Ethan lagged behind, glancing over, his shoulder like a hunted animal. Thomas's first instinct was to call Robert, but he stopped himself. The boys weren't criminals. They were pawns. If he confronted them now, he might save them from crossing a line they couldn't uncross. He stepped out of the office, the cool night air sharp against his skin. "Evening, boys," he said, his voice calm but firm, loud enough to startle them. Lucas froze, the bag slipping slightly in his grip. Ethan jumped, his eyes wide with panic. "Mr. Carter," Ethan stammered, his voice barely audible. "Where?" "Just fixing something?" Thomas cut in, nodding toward the bag. "At 1 in the morning? On a pump that doesn't need fixing?" Lucas's jaw tightened, his hand hovering over the bag. "We're not doing anything wrong," he said. But his defiance was brittle. Cracked by fear, Thomas crossed his arms, stepping closer. "I heard you at the park. Vincent's got you scared, and I get why. But whatever he's got you doing, this isn't the way out." He softened his tone, meeting Ethan's frightened gaze. "You're smarter than this, both of you." Ethan's shoulders slumped, his breath hitching. Lucas looked away, his fists clenching. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence heavy with their fear. Then Ethan broke, his voice trembling. "He threatened our families. He knows where my mom works, where Lucas's sister goes to school. If we don't do what he says, he'll—" "What?" Thomas pressed, keeping his voice steady. "Hurt them?" "He only has power if you let him keep it. Tell me what's going on, and I'll help you." Lucas scoffed, but his eyes betrayed his doubt. You're just some gas station guy. What can you do against him?" Thomas held his gaze, unflinching. "More than you think. But I need to know what Vincent's planning. What's he using the pump for?" After a long pause, Lucas sighed, dropping the bag to the ground. "Fine," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if he finds out we talked—" "He won't," Thomas said firmly. "Not until it's too late for him." Inside the office, with the door locked and Clara distracted at the register, the boys spilled their story. Vincent had approached them months ago, offering cash for small job scouting delivery routes, watching for cops. But the tasks grew darker, culminating in the plan to tamper with Pump 4. "He's moving something through the station," Lucas said, his voice low. "Not just fuel. He calls it product. We don't know what it is, but he's got a whole set of trucks, guys watching us, everything." Ethan nodded, his hands fidgeting. "We saw him at a warehouse once, near the old mill. He was loading these small containers into a van. He said it was the last big job, but he sounded nervous, like something was going wrong." Thomas's mind raced. Containers, warehouses, nervous bosses, it sounded like drugs, maybe synthetics, moving through Ridgewood to avoid bigger city scrutiny. The GPS tracker in the pump was likely a way to monitor shipments or signal pickups. "Did he say when this job's happening?" Thomas asked. "Tomorrow night," Lucas said. "Midnight. He wants the pump rigged by then." Thomas leaned back, the weight of the timeline pressing on him. Less than 24 hours to act. He glanced at the diagram on his desk. Its arrow's now a chilling blueprint. You're not going back to him, he said. Not tonight, not ever. I'll handle this, but you need to stay out of sight. Ethan's eyes widened. But he'll come looking for us. He always knows where we are. Then we'll make sure he doesn't find you, Thomas said. You trust me, and I'll keep you safe. The boys exchanged a glance, their fear warring with a flicker of hope. Finally, Lucas nodded. Okay, but be careful. Vincent's not bluffing. As Thomas escorted them to the back exit, a shadow moved across the lot. He froze, his hand on the door. A figure lingered near pump 4, too tall to be Clara, too deliberate to be a customer. Thomas ushered the boys out, his voice low. Go home. Stay inside and don't answer the door. I'll find you tomorrow. Back at the register, Clara was oblivious, restocking candy bars. Thomas checked the monitors, his heart sinking as the figure vanished from view. He rewound the footage, catching a glimpse of a man with a tattooed neck, one of Vincent's crew, no doubt. The realization hit him. Vincent was already watching, and the station was no longer safe. At dawn, Robert Sullivan pulled into the lot, his pickup truck rumbling to a stop. Thomas met him outside, the morning mist curling around them. Vincent. Cole, Thomas said, handing over the diagram and a USB with the security footage. He's using my station to move something drugs, I think. He's got 2 kids doing his dirty work, and he's got eyes everywhere. Robert's brow furrowed as he studied the diagram. I ran his name. He's on the state police's radar, suspected of smuggling synthetics across state lines. If he's using your station, it's a hub, not a one-off. My contact can mobilize a team, but we need hard evidence. Then we'll get it, Thomas said, his voice grim. He's making a move tomorrow night. We need to be ready. As Robert drove off, Thomas's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Keep your nose out, or you'll regret it. His blood ran cold. Vincent knew someone was digging, and the clock was ticking faster than ever. Later that morning, Thomas spotted Maggie Walsh, Ethan's mother, crossing the street. To the station. Her face was drawn, her eyes heavy with worry. Mike, she said, her voice tight. Have you seen Ethan? He's been sneaking out at night, acting strange. I'm scared he's in trouble. Thomas hesitated, his cover straining under her gaze. He's a good kid, Maggie, he said carefully. I'll keep an eye out for him. If he's in trouble, I'll help him out of it. Maggie nodded, but her fear lingered. As she left, Thomas's resolve hardened. He wasn't just fighting for his station or his town. He was fighting for kids like Ethan and Lucas, for families like Maggie's. Vincent Cole had underestimated Ridgewood, and Thomas was about to show him what happened when you crossed a man with everything to lose. The dawn light crept over Ridgewood, painting the Gas and Go's faded sign in hues of pink and gray. Thomas Bennett stood in the empty lot, the morning mist curling around his boots, his eyes fixed on pump 4, the GPS tracker hidden inside its wiring was a silent sentinel, a reminder of Vincent Cole's grip on the station. Thomas's breath fogged in the chilly air, but his resolve burned hotter than ever. The boys Ethan Parker and Lucas Hayes had laid bare Vincent's scheme, a drug smuggling operation using the station as a cover, with pump 4 rigged to facilitate shipments. Tonight at midnight, Vincent would make his move, and Thomas had less than 18 hours to ensure it was his last. Inside the station, the fluorescent lights buzzed as Clara Evans prepped the coffee machine for the morning rush. Thomas kept his cover as Mike Carter, deflecting her curious glances with a forced smile. Rough night, Mike? She asked, her tone light but probing. Just the usual? Thomas replied, his mind elsewhere. Clara had nearly overheard his call with Robert Sullivan last night, and her mention of a stranger asking about him had set his nerves on edge. Vincent's reach was tightening, and Thomas couldn't afford a slip-up now. At 6 a.m., Robert Sullivan's pickup truck rumbled into the lot, its engine cutting through the quiet. Thomas met him at the diner across the street, a greasy spoon joint where locals swapped gossip over burnt coffee. The bell above the door jingled as they slid into a booth, the smell of bacon and stale cigarettes thick in the air. Robert, his weathered face etched with focus, spread a map of Ridgewood across the table. "My contact in the state police is on board," he said, keeping his voice low. "Vincent Cole's a known player synthetics, mostly fentanyl, moving through small towns to avoid federal heat. If he's using your station, we've got a shot to nail him, but we need to catch him in the act." Thomas slid the boy's diagram across the table, its crude lines now a blueprint for justice. "They said he's moving product tonight midnight through Pump 4. Small containers, probably drugs. He's got a crew, trucks, and he's watching the boys like a hawk." Robert studied the diagram, his brow furrowing. "This isn't amateur stuff. The GPS tracker you found, it's high-end, used for real-time logistics. He's likely syncing the pump's output with his shipments to mask the weight. We set up a sting, get him with the goods, and we've got probable cause for a search." Thomas nodded, but his thoughts drifted to Ethan and Lucas. The boys are terrified. Vincent's got dirt on their families, where they live, where they work. We need to keep them safe. "I'll arrange a safe house," Robert said. "My buddy can get a couple of plainclothes officers to watch them. But we need their help to confirm the timing and Vincent's setup. Can they handle it?" "They'll have to," Thomas said grimly. "They know more than they realize." The diner's door jingled, and Thomas's heart skipped as Ethan and Lucas stepped in, their faces pale but resolute. They'd slipped out of their homes at dawn, defying Vincent's orders to lie low. Thomas waved them over, ignoring the curious glance from a waitress. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low. "It's not safe." "We had to," Lucas said, sliding into the booth. "Vincent called last night. He's paranoid, said if we're not at the station tonight, he'll send someone to my sister's school." Ethan's hands trembled as he clutched a water glass. "He mentioned a warehouse by the old mill, said the shipments coming from there. We saw him load containers once small, like vials, wrapped in black tape." Robert's eyes narrowed. "That's our link. If we can tie the warehouse to the station, we've got a chain of custody. Can you describe the setup?" Lucas hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "It's a big place, boarded up, but there's a side door Vincent uses. He's got guys guarding it, and there's always a van parked out back." Thomas exchanged a look with Robert. The mill was a relic of Ridgewood's industrial past, abandoned since the 90s. If Vincent was using it as a staging ground, it explained the delivery trucks. Thomas had noticed. "We focus on the station," Thomas said. "Catch him with the shipment. Let the police raid the warehouse after." Robert nodded, pulling out his phone. "I'll get my contact to prep a team. We'll need surveillance on the station, unmarked cars, and a warrant ready to go. You'll need to keep the station looking normal, no sign we're onto him." Thomas's mind raced. Keeping Clara in the dark would be tricky. She was observant, and Vincent's crew was already sniffing around. "I'll handle it," he said. "But we need to move the boys now. Vincent's got eyes everywhere." As Robert made calls, Thomas turned to Ethan and Lucas. "You did the right thing coming here. We're going to end this, but you need to stay out of sight until it's over." Ethan's voice cracked. "What if he gets away? He'll know it was U.S. "He won't," Thomas said, his tone firm. "Not this time." By noon, Robert had arranged for the boys to be moved to a safe house on the edge of town, guarded by 2 off-duty officers. Thomas drove them there, the silence in his truck heavy with their fear. Lucas stared out the window, his jaw tight, while Ethan clutched a photo of his mother, Maggie Walsh. "She doesn't know," Ethan whispered. "If something happens to me—" "Nothing's happening to you," Thomas said, gripping the wheel. "You're getting through this, and so's your mom." At the safe house, a nondescript ranch with drawn curtains, the officers took over. Their calm professionalism a small comfort. Thomas left the boys with a promise. "I'll see you when this is done." But as he drove back to the station, a nagging doubt lingered. Vincent was smart, paranoid. One wrong move and the plan could collapse. Back at the Gas and Go, the afternoon shift was in full swing, with truckers and locals streaming through. Clara was at the register, her eyes lingering on Thomas as he restocked the coolers. "You're acting weird, Mike," she said, half joking. "Like you're expecting a robbery or something." Thomas forced a laugh, but his heart wasn't in it. "Just keeping busy, Clara." He'd caught her glancing at his phone earlier, and her curiosity was becoming a liability. To distract her, he asked her to inventory the back room, buying himself time to check the camera's dot in the office. Thomas reviewed the live feed, his stomach twisting as he spotted a new anomaly, a small, blinking device tucked behind the station's dumpster, barely visible. Another camera, not his. Vincent was watching, and Thomas had missed it until now. He disabled the device, his hands steady but his mind racing. Vincent's paranoia was a double-edged sword. It made him cautious, but also predictable. If he was watching the station, he'd show up tonight, expecting the boys to deliver. Thomas's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Teams in place. Unmarked cars on standby. Warrant approved. Keep the station open. Act normal. We move at midnight." Thomas typed a quick reply, but another message followed. This one from an unknown number. "You're digging a hole you can't climb out of." The threat was clear, and Thomas's blood ran cold. Vincent knew someone was closing in, but he didn't know how close as dusk settled. Thomas met Maggie Walsh outside the station, her face drawn with worry. "Ethan didn't come home last night," she said, her voice trembling. "I know you said you'd look out for him, Mike, but I'm scared. He's mixed up in something bad, isn't he?" Thomas's cover strained under her gaze. He couldn't tell her the full truth, not yet, but he couldn't lie to her either. "He's safe, Maggie," he said, choosing his words carefully. I'm working on getting him out of trouble. Trust me, okay?" Maggie's eyes searched his, desperate for reassurance. "You're a good man, Mike. Just bring my boy back." As she walked away, Thomas's resolve hardened. The station wasn't just his livelihood. It was Ridgewood's heartbeat, a place where families like Maggie's relied on stability. Vincent had turned it into a battleground, and Thomas was ready to fight. By evening, the lot was quiet, the pumps standing like sentinels under the fluorescent glow. Thomas adjusted the cameras, ensuring every angle was covered. He told Clara to take the night off, citing a slow shift, but her skeptical look lingered in his mind. The state police were in position, hidden in unmarked vans a block away. Robert would signal when Vincent arrived. All Thomas had to do was keep the station running and wait. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, a black SUV rolled into the lot, its headlights slicing through the darkness. Thomas's heart pounded. Vincent was early, and the game was about to begin. The Ridgewood Gas Go stood like a lone sentinel under the midnight sky, its fluorescent lights buzzing against the oppressive stillness. Thomas Bennett, still cloaked as Mike Carter, adjusted the security monitors in the back office, his eyes locked on the live feed of Pump 4. The GPS tracker hidden inside its wiring blinked in his memory, a silent alarm signaling Vincent Cole's imminent arrival. Tonight, the station wasn't just a business, it was a battleground, and Thomas was ready to end the war Vincent had waged on his town. The state police, coordinated by Robert Sullivan, waited in unmarked vans a block away, their radios silent. but poised for action. Ethan Parker and Lucas Hayes were safe in a secure location, their courage in revealing Vincent's plans the key to this moment. All Thomas had to do was keep the station running and hold his nerve. The lot was empty, the pumps casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Thomas had sent Clara Evans home early, citing a slow night, but her lingering glance had left him uneasy. Vincent's threatening text from earlier, "You're digging a hole you can't climb out of," echoed in his mind, a reminder that the criminal was watching, waiting for a mistake. Thomas checked his phone. 11:50 p.m., 10 minutes until Vincent's scheduled move. He adjusted the hidden camera he'd installed near Pump 4, ensuring every angle was covered. The footage would be the nail in Vincent's coffin, provided everything went according to plan. A low rumble broke the silence, and Thomas's pulse quickened as a black SUV rolled into the lot, its headlights slicing through the darkness. Vincent. Cole stepped out, his scarred face illuminated by the glow of a cigarette. Two men followed, one burly with a tattooed neck, the other wiry and twitchy, carrying a large duffel bag. They moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the lot for any sign of trouble. Thomas took a steadying breath, his hand brushing the earpiece Robert had given him. "They're here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Robert's reply crackled through. "Hold position. We move on my signal." Vincent crouched by Pump 4, his fingers working quickly to open the side panel. The tattooed man stood guard, his flashlight sweeping the lot, while the wiry one unzipped the duffel bag, revealing small black-taped containers stacked inside. Thomas's heart pounded. The product Ethan and Lucas had described, likely synthetic drugs, enough to flood the region. Vincent's operation wasn't just a local scheme. It was a pipeline, and Ridgewood was its hub. Thomas stepped out of the office, his movements deliberate, his cover as Mike Carter still intact. "Evening," he called, his voice calm but loud enough to draw Vincent's attention. "Something wrong with the pump?" Vincent's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing like a predator sizing up prey. "Just checking it out," he said, his gravelly voice laced with suspicion. "You're awfully curious for a gas station clerk." Thomas shrugged, stepping closer, his hands casually in his pockets to hide their tension. "Part of the job. Seems like you've got a lot riding on. This pump tonight." The tattooed man took a threatening step forward, but Vincent raised a hand, stopping him. "You've been poking around, haven't you?" Vincent said, his cigarette ember flaring as he exhaled. "Asking questions, watching my boys. Bad habit. Sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Thomas held his gaze, his voice steady. "Maybe I'm tired of watching you drag kids into your mess. Ethan and Lucas, they're done with you." Vincent's smirk vanished, replaced by a cold fury. "You think you're smart, don't you? Those kids are mine, and so's this station. You're just a nobody who's about to regret playing hero." The wiry man reached into the duffel bag, his hand brushing what looked like a handgun. Thomas's stomach twisted, but he kept his cool, his earpiece crackling with Robert's voice. "We've got eyes on the weapon. Stay calm, Thomas." Thomas took a step closer, his voice low. "You're not untouchable, Vincent. You've been sloppy GPS trackers, hidden cameras, threats. Someone's been watching you too." Vincent grabbed Thomas by the collar, his scarred face inches away. "You're a dead man," he snarled, his cigarette falling to the ground. Before he could act, the night erupted in red and blue lights. Sirens wailed as state police vehicles flooded the lot, their beams pinning Vincent and his men like moths. "Vincent Cole, hands where we can see them." A commanding voice boomed through a megaphone. Vincent froze, his grip on Thomas loosening as officers swarmed from the vans, weapons drawn. The tattooed man bolted toward the SUV. The two officers tackled him to the ground, his flashlight clattering across the asphalt. The wiry man dropped the duffel bag, raising his hands in surrender, his bravado gone. Vincent stood still, his eyes blazing with defiance. But he slowly raised his hands, the cigarette ember dying at his feet. "You set me up." Vincent spat, his voice venomous as an officer cuffed him. Thomas stepped back, smoothing his collar. "No, Vincent, you set yourself up. You just didn't know the station had a better owner than you thought." Robert Sullivan approached, his face grim but satisfied. "Nice work, Thomas," he said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "We've got everything, footage, the shipment, and these three in custody." An officer knelt by the duffel bag, unzipping it fully. Inside were dozens of black-taped containers, each filled with a clear liquid. "Fentanyl," the officer confirmed, his voice tight. "Enough to supply half the state." The pump was rigged to hide the weight during fuel audits. Thomas's chest tightened. The station, his father's legacy, had been a front for a drug pipeline, and he'd come inches from losing it all. But the boys were safe, and Vincent was done. That was what mattered. As the police secured the scene, Robert pulled Thomas aside. "The warehouse by the mill is being raided as we speak. Ethan and Lucas's intel was spot on. We found more containers, shipping logs, even a ledger linking Vincent to a syndicate out of Albany. This is bigger than Ridgewood." Thomas nodded, relief mingling with exhaustion. "What about the boys?" "They're safe," Robert said. "They'll need to give statements, but they're witnesses, not suspects." "You gave them a way out, Thomas. That's no small thing." The lot was a hive of activity, officers cataloging evidence while Vincent and his men were loaded into police vans. Thomas watched Vincent's SUV being towed, its headlights dark now, a relic of his reign. The station's pumps stood silent, their scratches and secrets exposed under the police floodlights. Thomas's phone buzzed with a text from Maggie Walsh. "Is Ethan okay? Please tell me he's safe." He typed a quick reply. "He's fine, Maggie. I'll bring him home soon." As the adrenaline faded, Thomas leaned against pump 4, the weight of the night settling over him. He'd fought for his station, his town, and 2 kids who deserved better than Vincent's shadow. The station was still, standing, but the scars of this fight would linger for him, for Ethan and Lucas, for Ridgewood. Robert joined him, his voice low. "You did good tonight. This town owes you." Thomas shook his head, his eyes on the horizon. "It's not about owing. It's about doing what's right." The police wrapped up their work, leaving the lot quiet once more. Thomas stood alone, the station's hum returning like a heartbeat. Vincent was gone, but the fight wasn't over. The syndicate, the warehouse, the drugs, there were more battles to come. But tonight, Ridgewood had won, and Thomas felt a flicker of hope. He'd uncovered the shadows of the pump, and he'd make damn sure they never returned. A month after Vincent Cole's arrest, the Ridgewood Gas Go glowed under a crisp autumn sun, its freshly painted sign catching the light like a beacon of renewal. The pumps, once scarred by scratches and secrets, stood polished and proud, there. A steady heartbeat for a town finding its footing again. Thomas Bennett leaned against the counter inside, no longer hiding as Mike Carter. The flannel and cap were gone, replaced by a simple button-down, his ownership of the station now. An open secret among locals. The lot bustled with familiar faces, truckers grabbing coffee, kids buying candy after school, and neighbors swapping stories about the big bust that had changed Ridgewood forever. The station's transformation was more than cosmetic. Thomas had invested in new security cameras, motion sensor lights, and a reinforced storage shed, ensuring no one could exploit the gas and go again. But the real change was deeper, rooted in the community itself. The fluorescent lights no longer felt oppressive. They were a promise of safety, a reminder that Ridgewood had faced its shadows and come out stronger. Thomas watched a group of teens linger by pump 4, laughing over a shared phone screen, and felt a quiet pride. This was what his father had built the station for. Not just fuel, but connection. A place where people belonged. Inside, Clara Evans restocked the soda cooler, her usual curiosity softened by a newfound respect. She'd pieced together Thomas's secret after the police raid, her initial shock giving way to admiration. "You're full of surprises, boss," she said, tossing him a grin. "Never thought I'd be working for a guy who takes down drug lords." Thomas chuckled, but his thoughts drifted to Ethan Parker and Lucas Hayes. The boys had been through hell, coerced by Vincent's threats into tampering with the station's pumps. Their courage in coming forward had been the key to unraveling his operation, a fentanyl pipeline that stretched from Ridgewood to Albany, masked by fuel shipments. The state police raid on the old mill warehouse, triggered by the boys' intel, had uncovered crates of synthetic drugs, shipping logs, and a network of dealers. Vincent and his crew were facing decades in prison, and the syndicate was crumbling under federal scrutiny. Thomas stepped outside, the autumn air carrying the scent of fallen leaves. The community had rallied in the aftermath, organizing a cleanup day to erase the last traces of Vincent's presence. Graffiti scrubbed from walls, broken windows replaced, and a new mural painted on the station's back wall, depicting Ridgewood's rolling hills. Posts on X captured the momentum, with hashtags like #Ridgewood rises trending locally. One user shared a photo of the mural, captioned, "This is our town, not the criminals." Another praised Thomas. Local hero turns gas station into a fortress of hope. The heart of the station's revival was a new youth program Thomas had launched. Inspired by Ethan and Lucas, the Gas Go now offered part-time jobs and mentorship for teens, teaching skills like auto repair and customer service while steering them away from trouble. Lucas had signed up, his usual bravado replaced by a quiet determination. Thomas spotted him now, sweeping the lot with a broom, his focus a far cry from the fear that had defined him weeks ago. Ethan, too, was healing, back on the school basketball team, his shy smile returning. Maggie Walsh, Ethan's mother, had become a regular at the station, her gratitude evident in every conversation. "Thomas," Maggie called, crossing the lot with a paper bag. "Brought you some muffins. Ethan's doing better, really better. He told me what you did, keeping him safe. I don't know how to thank you." Thomas took the bag, his throat tight. "You don't need to, Maggie. He's a good kid." They both are. Maggie's eyes glistened. "You gave him a second chance. That's everything." As she left, Thomas walked to the edge of the lot where a small crowd gathered for the station's first community event, a fall festival, complete with a food truck, face painting, and a local band setting up near the pumps. Kids darted between tables, their laughter mingling with the strum of a guitar. Lucas joined Ethan at a booth selling homemade cookies, their banter light, free of Vincent's shadow. Thomas caught their eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of their resilience. Robert Sullivan pulled up in his pickup, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Not bad for a guy who was just checking the tapes," he teased, clapping Thomas on the shoulder. "The feds are still digging into Vincent's network. That warehouse raid turned up enough to keep them busy for years." Thomas nodded, his gaze drifting to Pump 4. "What about the boys? They holding up?" "They're cooperating," Robert said. "Gave full statements, no charges. The DA's pushing for counseling, not punishment. They're lucky you stepped in when you did." Thomas's mind flashed to the night of the raid. Vincent's fury, the police lights, the fentanyl containers glinting in the duffel bag. He'd come close to losing everything, but Ridgewood had fought back. "Luck had nothing to do with it," he said. "They chose to trust me. That's what made the difference." The festival stretched into the evening, the lot glowing under string lights. Thomas mingled with neighbors, their stories a tapestry of gratitude and hope. A retired teacher thanked him for the youth program, a trucker praised the new cameras, and a group of teens proposed a car wash fundraiser for the station. Thomas listened, his heart full, but a quiet resolve lingered. Vincent's arrest was a victory, but the syndicate's reach meant more threats could emerge. He'd stay vigilant, ready to protect his town again, as the band played its final song. Thomas stood by the mural, its vibrant hills a testament to Ridgewood's spirit. A bulletin board nearby was covered with thank you notes from residents, one from Ethan and Lucas standing out. "Thanks for believing in us." Thomas traced the words, his father's voice echoing in his mind. "Build something that lasts, Thomas. Not just a business, but a home." He'd honored that promise, not with profits, but with people, the kids who'd found a path, the families who felt safe, the town that refused to break. The stars emerged, bright against the autumn sky, and Thomas felt a peace he hadn't known in months. The Gas and Go wasn't just a station. It was Ridgewood's heart, proof that courage and community could outshine any shadow. He'd fought for his father's legacy, and in doing so, he'd built one of his own. Shadows at the Pump is more than a tale of crime and confrontation. It's a celebration of human resilience and the power of community. Thomas Bennett's journey from a cautious observer to a protector of his town reflects a universal truth. One person's courage can spark change, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Ethan and Lucas, trapped by fear, remind us that vulnerability is not weakness, but a call for compassion. Their choice to trust Thomas and his unwavering belief in them underscores the story's heart. Redemption is possible when we see people, not just their mistakes. The lessons are profound. Communities thrive when individuals take responsibility, not just for themselves, but for each other. Ridgewood's recovery through youth programs, festivals, and shared purpose shows that healing comes from connection, not isolation. The story challenges us to confront the shadows in our own lives, whether crime, fear, or neglect, and to build systems that protect the vulnerable. It's a call to action. Be the one who steps up, who listens, who fights for what's right. If this story inspired you, join us at Legacy Stories on YouTube, where we share narratives of courage, redemption, and hope. Subscribe to Legacy Stories to discover more tales that remind us of the power of doing good. Hit that subscribe button and become part of a community celebrating stories that light the way forward.